The large alien ship hovered in space, a glimmering fortress of technology that seemed to stretch for miles. Inside the ship, the atmosphere was tense. The alien queen, a powerful being with dark, glittering skin and sharp, regal features, paced back and forth in her quarters. She had tried everything to calm her baby, but nothing worked. The baby cried and cried, its high-pitched wails echoing throughout the halls of the royal chamber. The queen's attendants stood by, helpless and frustrated. They had tried the music from their homeworld, the gentle rocking of the cradle, even a soothing ritual that had worked for generations. But nothing seemed to calm the child. Her people were known for their wisdom and advanced science. But when it came to their young, they had no answers. The queen felt a lump form in her throat as she listened to her baby's cries. She loved her child more than anything in the galaxy, and to hear the baby in distress was unbearable. It was more than just the sound. It was the helplessness that gnawed at her. The whole ship had fallen silent in anticipation. But even the silence could not stop the growing fear in the queen's heart. Her eyes darted to the corner of the room, where a human stood. Jake, a simple soldier who had been assigned to the peacekeeping mission between the humans and her people, watched the scene with a quiet intensity. He had been in the room for hours, trying to stay out of the way. But now he could not ignore the cries any longer. The queen turned her sharp gaze toward him. She had barely spoken to him since his arrival on the ship. Humans were seen as primitive by many of her people, and she had never been keen on interacting with them. They were important in the peace process, yes, but she had always viewed them from a distance. Still, in that moment, she felt a flicker of something, a strange sense of connection. Perhaps it was the exhaustion, or perhaps it was the desperation, but she spoke. "Do you think you can help?" The queen's voice was soft, yet filled with authority. Her sharp eyes were fixed on Jake as she spoke, her desperation evident. Jake hesitated. He was just a soldier, not a caregiver. He had no experience with alien infants, let alone a royal one. But the queen's eyes were intense, and the cries of the baby were hard to ignore. I don't know if I can," Jake said, his voice calm but uncertain. "But I've raised younger siblings back on Earth. I've calmed them down. When they were upset, I might be able to help." The alien attendants exchanged uncertain glances. They were skeptical, to say the least. Humans were not known for their delicate handling of royal matters, and they were far from experienced in alien child-rearing customs. But they were at their wits' end. "Do what you must," the queen said, her voice betraying a hint of vulnerability. Jake stepped forward, carefully approaching the crib where the baby lay. The infant's cries were heartbreaking, and he could feel his heart ache as he looked at the tiny, struggling creature. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before, its fur shimmering in soft hues of blue and purple. Its small body trembled. As it cried, the tears running down its alien face, Jake took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had seen babies cry before, but never anything like this. He gently picked up the baby, supporting its tiny head in his hands. It was warm and soft, and he could feel its heartbeat thudding against his chest. The baby was small, no bigger than a human infant, but the weight of it felt differentalian yet fragile. He whispered softly to the child, his voice low and soothing. "It's okay," he murmured, rocking the baby gently in his arms.
"Here."
"Got you. You're safe." For a moment the room was completely silent except for Jake's calming words. The alien attendants, who had expected nothing to change, stood frozen, their mouths slightly agape. The queen's eyes widened as she watched the baby's cries slowly fade. The infant's body relaxed, its tiny hands no longer clenched in distress. The baby's eyes fluttered closed. It began to fall asleep in Jake's arms. The queen couldn't believe what she was seeing. How was it possible? Her child, who had been crying for hours, was now resting peacefully. She had tried everything her people had to offer, but none of it had worked. And yet, this human had managed to calm her child with nothing more than a gentle touch and some quiet words. She felt a strange warmth in her chest as she watched. For the first time in hours, she felt relief. The queen was no longer anxious. and she found herself drawn to the human who had managed to do what her people could not. Jake gently placed the baby back into the crib, careful not to disturb the peaceful sleep it had finally found. He stepped back, a little unsure of what had just happened. The attendants and the Queen all remained quiet, still processing what they had just witnessed. The Queen looked at him, her gaze softening. She didn't know how to express what she was feeling, but she had never been more thankful for anyone in her life than she was in that moment. The human man who had been a stranger to her had somehow become a source of comfort. She found herself wondering about the strange power humans had over emotions, how they could offer such warmth with so little. Jake stood awkwardly, not sure what to say. I guess, I'm glad I could help. The Queen's voice was soft, but filled with a quiet intensity. You've done something no one else could do. The human soldier, who had always been trained for battle, now found himself caught in an entirely different kind of mission. The Queen had just revealed something that no one could have predicted: the quiet power of a simple human touch. The Queen stood in silence, her eyes fixed on Jake as he gently cradled her child. The atmosphere in the room had changed. Where there had been tension and worry, now there was a calm, a sense of relief that hadn't been present for hours. Baby, once crying uncontrollably, was now resting peacefully in the crib. The Queen's chest, which had been tight with worry, finally relaxed. She glanced at her attendants, who were equally stunned. They had tried everything they knew, yet it was the human who had brought peace to the child, the attendants whispered, among themselves, uncertain of what to make of the situation. The Queen, however, could not ignore the strange feeling that had settled within her. Jake looked up at her, feeling a bit awkward under her gaze. He wasn't used to being in the presence of royalty, let alone having any significant role in their lives. But the Queen's expression had softened, and for the first time, she didn't seem so distant. "Thank you," the Queen said, her voice softer than before, though still filled with authority. "I did not expect this." Jake nodded, unsure how to respond. "I'm just glad she's calm now. It's what I used to do for my little brother when he was upset." The Queen's brow furrowed slightly. "Your people, they raised their young with such care." Jake's lips curled into a small smile. "I guess you could say that. We don't have all the answers, but we do what we can." Her eyes studied him. "Carefully, you are unlike any human I've encountered. Your presence, ... it has an effect on my child." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't do anything special." The Queen was silent for a moment before speaking again. "Perhaps not, but you managed to do what my people could not. That is not a small thing." She turned to the attendants. "Leave us." The attendants exchanged glances, hesitant to disobey their Queen. But they respected her decision and quietly filed out of the room, leaving the Queen and Jake alone. Now that the room was empty, the Queen's posture shifted. She relaxed slightly, though she still held herself with dignity. "I admit, I have always viewed humans as ... primitive, but this is something new." Jake felt his heart race at her words. He had always known that humans were often seen as lesser in the eyes of other species. But to hear it spoken so plainly by someone of the Queen's stature made him uneasy. "I don't know what you mean," Jake said, his voice tentative. The Queen gave him a look that was both curious and thoughtful. "Your kind are known for their strength, but not for your compassion. That is why it is strange. But there is something in you that is different. It calms my child, and in turn it calms me." Jake ran a hand through his hair, unsure of how to handle this sudden shift in their relationship. He had been just a soldier on a peacekeeping mission, not a hero or a diplomat. The Queen was a powerful leader, and yet here she was, telling him that his actions had changed something in her. "I didn't mean to cause any changes," Jake said quietly. "I was just trying to help." The Queen studied him, her gaze unwavering. "Perhaps that is the problem. Perhaps you do not see the power in what you did." Jake shook his head, still uncomfortable with the idea. "I'm just a soldier. I'm good at following orders. I've never done anything like this before." The Queen stepped closer, her voice lower now, as if she were considering her words carefully. "Your people have a way of healing." "A way?" of reaching others. It is not just physical strength you possess. It is a strength of spirit, and it is something I have seen only rarely in my lifetime. Jake couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. He was used to being praised for his strength, his ability to fight, but praise for compassion? That was something new, and a little awkward. "I'm not sure about all that," he muttered, glancing at the baby sleeping peacefully in the crib. "I just did what came naturally. Sometimes that's all you can do." The Queen nodded slowly. "Perhaps that is the key. What comes naturally. That is why I did not expect to find comfort in a human, but now I wonder what more I might learn from your kind." Jake felt his heart skip a beat at the Queen's words. "What do you mean?" The Queen hesitated for a moment before speaking. "We, the ones of my species, have long been focused on strengths. In power, in conquest, in victory. But I wonder now if we have overlooked something that your people possess." She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "I think I need to learn more, not just about your strength, but about your heart." Jake looked at her, confused. He wasn't sure what to make of what she was saying. She was a queen, someone used to power and command. But now she was admitting something he hadn't expected. Curiosity, perhaps even admiration, for the very species she had once looked down upon. "I don't know how much I can teach you," Jake said, his voice soft. "But I'll try, if you're willing to listen." The Queen's lips curved upward into a faint smile. It was small, but it was there. "I am willing." There was a silence between them as the two of them stood there looking at the baby. Now, asleep and calm. It was as if a new understanding had passed between them. The Queen, once so distant and unapproachable, now seemed more human in her emotions. And Jake, a soldier in a foreign world, found himself in a strange new role one he had never anticipated. Finally, the Queen spoke again. "Thank you, Jake, for showing me something my people have forgotten." Jake met her gaze. It was nothing, really. But deep down, he knew that it wasn't nothing. Something had changed in both of them. And as unlikely as it seemed, it was just the beginning. The days passed slowly on the ship. Jake had never expected to find himself in a situation like this. The Queen's infant, once a source of endless distress, had grown attached to him. The baby now rested peacefully whenever he was near, as though something in his presence comforted it. The Queen, though still a powerful and dignified figure, had begun to seek Jake out more often, asking him about his people, his life, his experiences. Jake, too, found himself drawn to her. At first, he had only been trying to help, but now he found himself talking to the Queen as if they were equals. He listened as she spoke of her world, her responsibilities as a queen, and the struggles she faced in ruling an empire. She was not just a leader, she was a mother, a person with her own doubts and fears, just like anyone else. One evening, after a long day of meetings and diplomatic discussions, the Queen invited Jake to join her in the royal gardens. The place was serene, with alien plants blooming under the soft light of the ship's artificial suns. The air was filled with the scent of strange flowers, and the soft hum of the ship's engines was the only sound in the background. Jake followed the Queen into the garden, unsure of what to expect. He had spent most of his life on Earth, in cities and battlefields, never imagining that one day he would be walking in the garden of an alien queen. "Come," she said softly, her voice calm. "I often come here to think. It is quiet, peaceful." Shh nodded, taking in the beauty around him. He had never seen anything like this. The plants seemed to glow with an inner light. The flowers were unlike any on Earth. The air felt fresh, cool, and calming, and for a moment, Jake forgot about the alien politics, the space battles, and the strange new world he had found. "Himself and your world is beautiful," Jake said, his voice filled with awe. The Queen smiled, though it was a small, wistful smile. "It has its beauty," she replied, "but I have come to see it as a burden. I was born to lead, to guide my people. My duty is always before me." Jake watched her closely. There was something in her voice that made him pause. She was not just a queen, she was a person struggling with her role. He had seen it before in humans, the weight of Responsibility could sometimes feel heavier than any armor. You don't have to do it alone, Jake said quietly. There are others who will help. You don't have to carry everything by yourself. The queen turned to look at him, her dark eyes searching his face. You speak as if you understand, she said, but you are only a soldier. You do not understand the weight of ruling an entire empire. Jake felt a pang of sadness. He wasn't a king or a ruler. He was just a man who had seen too much of war. But he had also seen the power of unity, of working together to overcome challenges. And maybe, just maybe, it was the same for her. I understand more than you think, he said gently. I've seen leaders break under pressure. I've seen people who carry the weight of their duties for too long. And I've seen them fall. But I've also seen how working together, how trusting others, it can make all the difference. The queen was silent for a moment. She looked at the stars. Through the transparent dome of the garden, the vastness of space stretched before them, a reminder of the power she held. But she didn't seem as sure of herself as she had before. What if I fail? She asked softly, almost as if she were speaking to herself. What if I am not strong enough to lead my people through the challenges ahead? Jake took a deep breath. He had been trained to face enemies, to survive in hostile environments, but he had never been good with emotions. Still, he couldn't stand to see her in pain, especially when it seemed like she was the one who had to carry it all. You don't have to be perfect, he said. None of us are. And no one expects you to do everything on your own. You have your people, your allies, and you have strength in places you may not even realize. The queen turned to him, her eyes softening. You speak with such certainty. It is strange to hear such words from a human. My people have always prided themselves on their wisdom, but perhaps we have forgotten something. The strength of unity, the strength of heart. Jake nodded, feeling a warmth inside. The queen had been the symbol of authority and power, but now he saw a different side of her, a side that was vulnerable. It's just like anyone else. You've already done more for your people than you think, Jake said. You've led them through countless challenges, and you'll lead them through this one too. You don't have to do it alone. The queen looked at him, her gaze filled with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something that felt almost like a connection. Perhaps I was wrong about humans, she said quietly. Perhaps you are not so primitive after all. Jake smiled, though it was a little awkward. I'll take that as a compliment, he said. The queen chuckled. Softly, it was the first time Jake had heard her laugh. It was a small sound, but it was warm and full of grace, and it made Jake feel more at ease than he had since he first stepped onto the ship. They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars in the distance. The baby's cries, which had once seemed so distant and overwhelming, no longer echoed through the halls. Instead, the peacefulness of the moment filled the space between them. Jake knew that things were changing. He could feel it in the air, in the way the queen looked at him, and in the way her heart seemed to open. The queen, once so distant, had begun to see humans not just as a race to be tolerated, but as something more. And Jake, for his part, had begun to see the queen not just as a ruler, but as someone who, like him, was doing her best in a difficult world. As they walked back toward the ship, the weight of their conversation hung between them, but it wasn't a burden. It was the beginning of something new, a bond that, though fragile, was beginning to form. And for the first time since arriving on the ship, Jake felt like he truly understood the queen. She wasn't just a powerful alien ruler. She was a mother, a leader, and a person trying to do what was best for her people. Just like him. Days passed, and Jake found himself spending more time with the queen and her child. What had started as a simple attempt to calm the baby had grown into something more, a connection between two beings from completely different worlds. The queen, once distant and aloof, had begun to open up to him in ways he never imagined. Jake had always been a soldier, trained to follow orders, fight battles, and survive. But now he was finding a new kind of strength, rooted not in physical power, but in understanding, compassion, and quiet support. It was strange, but Jake felt like he was becoming a part of something much bigger than himself. The queen, too, was changing. She was no longer just the ruler of a powerful empire. She was a mother, a woman who carried the weight of her people's hopes and fears. And as she spent more time with Jake, she began to see the world through a different lens. One afternoon, as the ship traveled through the vastness of space, the Queen asked Jake to join her for a walk in the royal gardens again. The baby was peacefully asleep in her crib, and the attendants had been given the afternoon off. It was just the two of them, alone in the quiet of the garden. The air was cool, and the sky above them was filled with the soft glow of distant stars. The flowers in shades of purple, blue, and green swayed gently in the breeze. The garden was a place of peace, a stark contrast to the chaos and politics of the royal court. It was here that the Queen allowed herself to relax. To forget for a moment about her responsibilities, Jake walked beside her, feeling more at ease than he ever had. They were no longer just strangers, thrown together by circumstance. There was a bond between them now. A bond built on shared experiences and quiet conversations. "I've been thinking," the Queen said, her voice soft but steady. "You are not like the others. Your people. You are different. I never truly understood humans before. I saw you as a species with no real place in the galaxy. But now I see something else. I see a people who have something we have forgotten." Jake raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her words. "What do you mean?" he asked. The Queen stopped walking and turned to face him. "Your people have something we have lost the ability. To care, to offer warmth without expectation. My people, we are powerful. Yes. No. But we have become so focused on strength and victory that we have forgotten how to show compassion. We have forgotten how to truly listen." Jake listened quietly, feeling a deep sense of respect for her words. He had always thought of his own species as flawed, full of mistakes and weaknesses. But now, hearing the Queen's thoughts, he realized that every species had its own struggles. Even the most powerful beings in the galaxy had their own battles to fight. "I think that's something we all need to remember," Jake said softly. "We all have strengths and weaknesses. What matters is how we use them. No one can be perfect, and maybe it's not about being perfect. Maybe it's about finding balance, helping each other when we can." The Queen nodded slowly, her eyes searching his face as if she were seeing him for the first time. "You speak with such wisdom, for one so young," she said. "Perhaps I was wrong to see humans as inferior. You have shown me that there is more to your kind than I realized." Jake shifted uncomfortably at the praise. He wasn't used to being seen as wise or important. He was just a soldier, after all, someone who had been trained for battle. Now, in the Queen's presence, he felt like he was part of something much bigger. "I'm just trying to do what's right," he said. "That's all any of us can do." For a moment, the Queen was silent, deep in thought. Then she spoke. Again, her voice quieter this time. "I've spent my life fighting for power, for control. But I wonder now, what good is power if it cannot protect those we care about?" Jake looked at her, understanding the weight of her words. The Queen had always been a symbol of strength, of authority. But now, she was beginning to question the very things that had shaped her life. And that, Jake realized, was a sign of growth. "There's no easy answer," Jake said. "But I think it starts with the little things, like holding a child when they're upset, or listening when someone needs to talk. Sometimes it's the smallest acts that make the biggest difference." "No?" The Queen looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. "You have a way of making things seem simpler than they are. Perhaps it is that simplicity that my people have lost. In our quest for greatness, we have forgotten the power of kindness." Jake shrugged, a small smile forming on his face. "It's not always easy, but it's worth it. And maybe it's something your people could use, something to balance out." "All that strength?" The Queen turned her gaze to the stars above, lost in thought. "Perhaps," she murmured. "Perhaps that is the key. Strength without compassion is hollow. But strength with compassion—" She trailed off, her voice thoughtful. "That might be something truly powerful." Jake nodded. He didn't have all the answers, but he believed in what he was saying. He believed that change could come, even if it was small at first. And maybe, just maybe, he and the Queen were part of something that could make a real difference in the galaxy. The quiet conversation continued as they walked through the garden, each lost in their own thoughts. The baby's cries were a distant memory now, replaced by the soft rustling of the leaves and the peaceful hum of the ship. For Jake, the days ahead were uncertain. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He had found something here, something worth fighting for, not just for the humans, but for everyone. And maybe, just maybe, the galaxy wasn't as divided as it seemed. The days on the ship continued to pass, and with each day, Jake felt more at ease in the presence of the Queen and her people. The bond that had started with something as simple as calming a crying baby had now grown into something far deeper. Jake found himself spending more time with the Queen, listening to her thoughts and offering his own insights. The Queen, in turn, seemed to value his presence. The walls she had built around herself were slowly crumbling. One evening, the Queen asked Jake to join her in the royal chambers. The room was vast, with high ceilings and walls adorned with alien artwork. Soft lights filled the space, casting gentle shadows on the floor. The Queen sat on a large cushioned chair, her posture regal as always. But tonight there was a softness to her that Jake had not seen before. "Jake," she began, her voice calm but heavy with thought. "You have been here for weeks now, and I have been reflecting on everything that has happened. The baby, my child, your calming presence, the way you have helped me see things differently, ... It is something I never expected." Uncomfortably, not used to receiving praise. "I didn't do much. I just helped the baby feel safe." The Queen smiled faintly, but it was a smile that held meaning. It was more than that. "You did not just calm my child," you reminded me of something important. "My people, we are powerful, yes. But power can make us forget how to care. You have shown me the strength of simple kindness, something I had lost sight of." Jake felt a warmth in his chest as he listened to her words. He had always been taught that strength came from physical power, from the ability to fight and survive. But now, in this alien world, he was beginning to understand that strength could also come from gentleness, from empathy. "Sometimes it's easy to forget the simple things," Jake said quietly. "We get so caught up in the big picture that we forget what really matters. But it's the small things that can change everything." The Queen nodded, her eyes reflecting a depth of understanding. "I have always ruled with strength, with authority. But now, I wonder if I have been wrong. Strength is not just about ruling with power. It is about guiding, about protecting those we care for. It is about listening, about offering help when needed." Jake looked at her, a feeling of admiration welling up inside him. The Queen was not just a ruler. She was a person, struggling to find her own balance. She was learning, just like anyone else. "You're not alone in this," Jake said, his voice steady. "I know it can feel like it sometimes, but you don't have to carry everything by yourself. You have people who care about you, and you have the strength to lead them, but you don't have to do it alone." The Queen's expression softened, and for the first time, she seemed truly vulnerable. "I have always been afraid to show weakness," she admitted. "My people look to me for strength, expect me to have all the answers, to always be in control. But sometimes, I don't have all the answers. And that is frightening." Jake took a step closer to her, his gaze gentle. "It's okay to not have all the answers. No one does. What matters is that you're willing to learn, to grow, and to change. That takes more strength than you realize." For a long moment, the Queen said nothing. Her gaze was distant, lost in thought, as if she were processing everything that Jake had said. Then, slowly, she spoke again. "Perhaps I have been too focused on power and control," she said softly. "Perhaps it is time for me to change, to lead in a different way. I have seen the strength in your people, in your compassion, in the way you care for each other. Maybe it is time to learn from that." Jake felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had never expected his simple actions to have such an impact, but now he saw that they had made a difference. The Queen, once so distant and powerful, was beginning to embrace something different, something that was not about domination, but about unity and care. "I think you already know more than you think," Jake said with a small smile. "You've been leading in your own way for a long time. It's not about doing things the way others expect. It's about doing what's right for you and your people." The queen looked at him with a look of gratitude in her eyes. "Oh, you are." "Right," she said softly. "Thank you, Jake, for showing me something I had forgotten, for helping me see that there is more to strength than just power." Jake nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest. He didn't know where this journey would take him, or what the future held for the queen and her people. But he knew that, in this moment, it shared something meaningful, a connection that went beyond their species, beyond their roles. As soldiers and rulers, the queen stood up, her posture still commanding, but there was a new light in her eyes. "There is still much work to be done," she said, her voice strong again. "But I think we are on the right path." Jake smiled. "I think so too." As they stood together in the quiet of the royal chamber, there was a sense of calm that had not been there before. The queen, once so distant, had opened herself up to change. And Jake, once just a soldier, had become something more, someone who had helped a powerful leader see the value of compassion. They didn't have all the answers, and there was still much to do. But for the first time, they both felt like they were moving forward, together. And that, in itself, was enough. The days on the ship had grown quieter, but there was a noticeable change in the air. The queen, once seen as untouchable and unreachable, had begun to transform. She no longer carried herself with the same heavy weight of fear and uncertainty. The walls she had built around her heart had started to crumble. And in their place, there was something softer, something more human. Jake had never imagined that his time here would have such an impact. He was just a soldier, a man who had seen the worst of humanity, and yet here he was. In the presence of a queen, someone who could command entire fleets, and still he had made a difference. It wasn't through force or strength, but through something simpler, touch, a kind word, and a willingness to listen. The queen had begun to trust him more. It wasn't just about the baby anymore, though that bond remained strong. It was about something deeper, shared understanding that they were both, in their own ways, trying to do what was best for their people. You're begun to ask Jake for advice, to speak with him about her fears and hopes for her empire. She was no longer alone in her struggles. One evening, as the stars twinkled brightly outside the ship's windows, the queen invited Jake to join her in her private chambers. This was not an unusual request, but tonight, there was a sense of purpose in her voice. "Jake," she said, as he entered, her voice calm but firm, "I've been thinking about our conversations about what you've said. I've come to a decision." Jake raised an eyebrow, curious. "What kind of decision?" The queen motioned for him to sit across from her at a large circular table. The room was quiet, with only the hum of the ship's engines in the background. She folded, her hands on the table, her gaze steady as she met his eyes. "My people," she began slowly, "have always believed in strength. Power is what has kept us safe, kept us at the top of the galaxy. But I see now that it's not enough. Strength, without compassion, without care for others, is nothing more than an empty shell." Jake listened intently, sensing the weight of her words. The queen was a ruler, someone who had been taught to value power above all else. But now, she was rethinking everything. "I want to change," she continued. "I want to lead in a way that is different. I want to show my people that there is strength in kindness, in cooperation. But I need your help, Jake. I need you too. Stand with me as I do this." Jake was taken aback by her request. He had always been just a soldier. He wasn't a leader, wasn't someone who would normally be asked to guide an entire empire. But the sincerity in her eyes told him that she wasn't asking this lightly. She was reaching out not just to him as a soldier, but as a friend, someone who had shown her a different way. "I'm just a human," Jake said quietly. "I don't know how to lead an empire. I've never been in your position." Queen smiled faintly, as if she understood his hesitation. "Neither had I once. I was born into this role, but I'm learning that leadership isn't about ruling with fear. It's about understanding, compassion, and building something greater than yourself." Jake felt a warmth spread through him as he looked at her. Had never seen her so open, so vulnerable. The queen, who had once seemed so distant, now seemed more like a persona, mother, a leader, someone who was learning to adapt and grow. "You don't have to do it alone," Jake said, his voice steady. "We'll figure it out together. I'm with you." The queen's eyes softened, and she leaned back in her chair. "I never thought I'd hear those words from you," she said with a smile. "But I'm glad you said them." They sat in silence. For a moment, the weight of their conversation hanging between them. The decision had been made, and both of them knew that the future of the empire, perhaps the future of their people, was about to change. Over the following days, the queen began to put her plan into motion. She started speaking to her people in new ways, calling for cooperation and understanding instead of just strength. She worked with her advisors to create a new vision for the empire, one where compassion and kindness were just as important as power and control. It wasn't an easy shift, and many of the old ways were hard to let go of. But the queen was determined to lead her people into a new era. Jake remained by her side, offering his support and advice when needed. He wasn't a ruler, but he had seen the power of compassion, of simple acts of kindness, and he knew that the queen was on the right path. One evening, as they stood together in the garden, watching the stars, the queen turned to him. "Do you think it will work?" she asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. "Will my people accept this change?" Jake looked at her, his heart full of hope. "I think they will," he said. "It might take time, but I believe in what you're doing. You're not just changing your empire, you're changing the way your people think. That's the most powerful thing you can do." The queen nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Thank you, Jake. I never could have done this without you." Jake smiled back, feeling a deep sense of pride. "You're the one doing all the hard work. I'm just here to help when I can." As the two of them stood in the quiet of the night, the stars twinkling above them, they both knew that things were changing. The queen had found a new way to lead, one that was built on understanding and compassion. And Jake, the soldier from Earth, had become an unexpected ally in her journey. There was still much work to be done, and the future remained uncertain. But for the first time in a long while, they both felt like they were on the right path.